Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tech Talks with TFN. I am Akansha Dimbri, and I'm so very excited to have you with us today. Here on Tech Talks, we spotlight the inspiring journeys of startups revolutionizing in the tech space, reshaping industries, sparking innovation, and driving change. And today's episode is no exception. We are sitting down with Peter Lipka, the co founder and COO of Improbable, a leading British technology company advancing virtual world creation and metaverse innovation. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive into the future of metaverse and digital transformation together with Improbable. Welcome, Peter. How are you feeling today, finally?
I'm feeling great now. Thank you for delaying the interview, and a pleasure to be here.
Lovely. And I had so many questions for you because I was so excited for this interview. But I would really want to know about your opinion on a couple of weeks ago, there was UK's Government AI Opportunity Action Plan. How do you envision the future of AI in the UK over the next decade?
So I think first it's great. I think that the government is finally starting to communicate a little bit around its AI strategy, because I think it's been a bit quiet for a while. So it's great that they've come out with this, and these three strategic pillars, of which I really do agree with two of them, but one of them I think I slightly disagree with. Right. So in terms of investing in the foundations of AI, I think there's some really great communication there, like an appreciation, for example, that there's going to be a lot of innovation improvements will come from the private sector, more so than necessarily the public sector, and then position themselves as the biggest customer to the private sector. I think is fantastic. They are investing in the actual infrastructure as well. I mean, the hardware of the GPUs that needed to run, I think is fantastic, especially in the UK. I don't know if any private companies can really do the same level of investment as the government can do. So I'm glad that government's pushing there. Unlocking data for AI training, also fantastic, and some pushing on the regulatory side too. I think where I was where I think it's going to be a bit more challenging is the third point, where it's talking about UK becoming an AI maker rather than a taker. I'm less inclined to agree, and I'm honestly quite doubtful that the UK government can really directly support that. I think building AI in close collaboration with the government is going. I think will be quite difficult. Right. The reality is that many of the companies that have got these incredible foundational models, they've done a few not so legal things to get there as well, right? Like, you hear stories about them literally torrenting millions and millions of books to be able to get the data to do that. Doing that in collaboration with the government may not, I'm not sure the government would condone that. And you have to move fast. Just look at DeepSeek in the last week or two. It's moving so fast. Collaboration with government could potentially slow things down, and so I'm very encouraged by the first two, and then the third one is a little bit weaker. And I think actually that also shows if you go on their website and look at they have 50 points, of which 49 of the points are for the first two strategic pillars, and there's 1 point for the third one. So it kind of highlights, I think, even the government is also a bit iffy about it too. In terms of the future, I'm not sure UK will be necessarily that different in terms of positions as many other developed countries. As unpopular as it is to say, AI is fundamentally about automating a significant number of jobs, and it's an incredibly powerful tool that is going to be like the printing press, like personal computers and the internet, and its potential to transform. And so I'm not sure any industry is going to be untouched by it, right? And I think those ones that embrace it, rather than trying to ban it and actively start working with it now, rather than pushing back and then accepting it, in a few years' time, are the ones that are going to have a much more smoother transition overall. And I think even those ones that traditionally people say, oh, manual labor, that's not going to be that impacted. But I think what we're also learning over the last few years is that even robotics has been very much limited by the software side more so than it is the physical side. And AI in particular has really encouraged, driving that over the last few years as well. So I think we've got a fundamental revolution coming up.
I know that's so interesting take on everything that you've shared, and at the same time, there are AI agents which are taking over, and everyone is scared, and everyone is at the same time trying to incorporate it. What do you think about it?
About AI agents in particular, I
Yes.
think one of the power of LLMs and generative AI is that the interface to it, the way you use it, is through natural language, is how you speak. And so one of the really interesting things about this kind of this set of technologies versus more traditional other set of technology, often is the engineering departments with software engineers that have to try and integrate a new piece of software into your company or build it. Whereas here, so you can bring up ChatGPT, start talking to it in natural language, and start it kind of supporting you and augmenting what you do. And so I think agents are really powerful in the sense that it's not going to be about a centralized approach where a company has to make an active choice to start using AI. It's naturally already happening. Even in companies, reality is even the companies have banned AI, employees are using it all the time, right, on the side. They've got their own personal accounts, talking to ChatGPT, DeepSeek nowadays as well, and they're using it. So, like it or not, every company is using AI quite significantly.
Yes, that's true, and it's already there. And then we have a cheaper version of AI, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, already making so much round and crumbling the stock prices for Nvidia and everyone. What is your opinion on that? If you would like to share that, what do you think? Will DeepSeek really get into the space and threaten the position of ChatGPT and Nvidia because it's creating stuff 5 times cheaper, as I've heard?
I think it is threatening it actively. It is under every benchmark that you look at, every use case, DeepSeek is up there together with the large Western LLMs, and and I think they are kind of threatening their position. That's why Nvidia has dropped in price so much, and I think it's to some degree it's a self-directed goal. Like in some ways, is that I think the tariffs, the bans on AI chips, has caused those industries in China to innovate a lot more and to do a lot more with a lot by being more frugal. And I'm personally a big believer that you that creativity is really, really driven by frugality. In fact, it's one of Improbable's company values, right? It's creativity through frugality. We're big believers that if you constrain some of the resources, you don't just throw money at a problem, you're going to come out much stronger.
That's true. I mean, so much has happened in the past couple of weeks, and I think so. I had to discuss this, and whenever I'm talking to a professional like you, which is in AI and metaverse, I have to ask. I cannot control myself, so sorry. So,
No, no, we would have had a very different discussion if this was happened 2 weeks ago, like originally scheduled. That's how fast things are moving. It's fascinating.
I know everything happens for the best, I guess. But but without much further ado, could you please share with our audience about your career journey, how you started from Imperial College as a graduate to becoming the co-founder of Improbable, and which is now like really big and has now become a venture company as well. So everything from the start of your business. I also interviewed Herman, and he told me that you started from a barn. So I would love
Mhm.
to really hear that part of story. It's like the American
Yeah,
barn.
yeah, it genuinely did start in a barn. Yeah, I was in Imperial about 2007 to 2011, and the world was especially in the UK, it was a very different place then. In particular, like none of the big US tech giants had really come over. Like they barely had offices. Facebook at the time. Google, Apple, Amazon. They had some presence, but it was a very low key presence. And Imperial specifically was. Was one of the top schools at the time for computer science, which is what I went to. But it was all finance industry. Like 60% of my entire year went into finance industry, right? So it was and they really did take some of the top graduates. So at the time, they took some of the best like people that I know in terms of software engineers and career went to the finance industry, and there wasn't that much of a feeling of entrepreneurship. Like it didn't honestly, it didn't really even cross my mind. Hey, I should do a business, right? It wasn't on the agenda. I kind of fell into the flow of going to university, getting the best grades, going to a top finance industry, going up the ranks there. And so so I actually joined Goldman Sachs straight after uni, and I did about 1.5 years there. But I felt it was. I wasn't applying the things I'd learned at university. I was dealing a lot with bureaucracy and red tape, and generally I felt like I was coasting. So I started to really look kind of elsewhere. In particular, there was one moment where I got told off a little bit for doing my job too well, which kind of was a little bit of a trigger. I'm like, and that's when and I was looking at other institutions, but that's when coincidentally I met Herman and Rob, and that kind of changed my trajectory. Right, they were full of energy, super smart, huge ambitions. It's like a shot of adrenaline, really, for me. And in terms of like how we talked, instead of just talking, we just started coding, start implementing. That was in that barn at Herman's house, and so and that kind of changed my trajectory, and started to kind of join them to co-found Improbable. And the funny part was I was the experienced one. Like I brought my 2 full years of GS and funny enough, I realized afterwards I learned a lot, and they learned a lot from me as I did from them. So that's really how kind of Improbable really started.
That's lovely. I mean, I always find the foundation journey is always so interesting to get to know that what was the idea behind it. So now that Improbable is there and it has become a metaverse unicorn, had so much funding, profitability, gone through so many challenges, recovered from it. So, how is your day-to-day operation like right now? And what are the part of strategies that you are part of?
I'm chief operating officer, so kind of I run the operations of the organization, quite far away from my software engineering roots. The way I like to think about it, the simplest way is I make sure that Improbable does what it says it's going to do effectively, right? That's kind of my role. But that often really starts at describing what you're going to do in the first place. A lot of businesses you talk about, especially startups and smaller organizations, they don't really have a really well defined, like, this is what we're trying to achieve quarter by quarter, for example, year by year. And so that's a big part of me, is setting those objectives, making sure that we're on track, efficiently delivering, and often a lot of my day to day is removing blockers. It's kind of escalations, and it spans pretty much every department. So everything from back office functions, legal, HR, finance, all the way to core technology, investor management. I drive the board meetings, and build out. So it's often about kind of trying to make the company as efficient and deliver as efficient as possible.
Got it. And also, recently, Improbable has significantly shifted its missions. So there was a pivot which was announced and which everyone knew about, from your original goal to becoming a venture builder focused on metaverse. And so, would you like to talk about that? What led to that pivot, and how is it going?
So the way I see it is less of a pivot and more of a formalization of how we were already operating and leaning more into that. So in terms of how Improbable, kind of early days of Improbable, we initially wanted to effectively make a virtual world, right? Like kind of like more like a game. And I realized the tech didn't work. And then we started to build out the infrastructure for that technology. Then we realized the technology has many other application use cases, not just in the virtual world space, or at the time we called it virtual worlds. Now metaverse is obviously the buzzword and taken over, um, and therefore we started applying this to multiple like kind of verticals and effectively forming multiple businesses. That's how we got into defense. And that's how we got into into gaming. That's also how we're in a blockchain as well. And so we were running, in terms of structure of the organization, we were already running all these separate businesses. They had separate P&Ls, they had separate leadership for all of them. And then we even did, M&A. Before we even announced this and formalization, we had done like 7 M&A acquisitions and sales. So in many ways, we were already operating that way. And the reason why we then formalized is realize that's quite what's been our strength. It's been building businesses, finding founders, leaders to run those businesses, playing more of a supporting act as founders a lot to them, making sure that they don't step into the same kind of navigate the same minefield that we had, right? Do the same issues that we've made ourselves, and so that's been kind of real success. Is building these businesses independently. But at the same time, we're also trying to build an ecosystem, right? And we realize, the metaverse is a really big vision, and we don't think that a single company should own the metaverse. And actually, really, what we're trying to do is build out an entire ecosystem of interdependent businesses. And so that's how we've got to venture builder, and that's the kind of operating model now.
Got it. Yeah, and I also wanted to understand, how do you approach your M&As and acquisitions, and what are the companies in which you're looking for?
We're trying to build an ecosystem with metaverse. And so what an ecosystem really means for us is businesses that are interdependent and that are supporting each other. So adding a new business supports the ecosystem as a whole. For example, if you were to add a small infrastructure business that vends, for example, certain GPUs, and a lot of our other businesses can now get cheaper GPUs than we would from a cloud that supports the entire ecosystem. So that's one angle we look at, is how does it support our own kind of portfolio that we already have, and we look at it from like the phrase I like to look is portfolio market fit. So is there a market fit for this business already within our portfolio businesses? However, we're also not in the world of trying to build businesses to subsidize the ecosystem, right? Like, we're not just doing this, hey, this would be good for everyone else, but this business doesn't make sense in of itself. So secondly, they need to make actual sense as businesses and themselves. And then, as a venture builder, we're often whilst we do definitely some in M&A, most of our businesses are homegrown. So we often identify opportunities ourselves, with specific problems that we've already come across and see if there's a business out there to try and solve it. And we take a look at it's like, hey, could this be housed under an existing business? Or does it make sense to bring a great entrepreneur to drive that? And does it make sense as an isolated, not isolated, but separate business in of itself? So so we look at it from all of these angles, and that's kind of how we make decisions in terms of on the building new businesses. On the kind of selling side, or kind of exiting side, what we really look at is how much are they contributing to the ecosystem, and is this is there where do we believe the market's going to go, and basically can we get a better price now for the asset versus what it looked like in 2 years, how much transformation that business needs, and so that's when we often decided, for example, defense wasn't in our core metaverse thesis anymore, and it diverged, and actually it was packaged up really good as a separate business that could do actually better off as either a separate independent business or under someone else, and that's why we decided to sell that to.
I also want to understand in 2025, what are the plans of Improbable in terms of M&As? Are there any more acquisitions that you're planning? Would you like to talk about it?
So right now we're not planning any particular acquisitions, but what we'd like to do is definitely kick off at least about 4 or 5 new ventures on top of the 9 or so that we have right now, and we're kind of deploying them in 3 separate areas. One is in kind of more traditional metaverse. The other one is in Web3, as to go along with our Somnia venture that is launching a new blockchain later this year, and as well as in the AI front as well. And what we're looking for the AI is not necessarily foundational models. It's our belief is that models don't solve problems like directly. You need people, you need software to effectively transform an organization to start using AI. And so some of the businesses we're building there are around that kind of AI transformation of larger enterprises, and often quite boring businesses, right? Not necessarily, because a lot of the really exciting software business could potentially do that momentarily. A lot of the more traditional business will struggle with that, and so therefore that's where there's a big opportunity for us to, as external, help support them into that transition. So that's currently our plans.
Yes, I don't think so. It's boring at all because I think all the boring stuff. This is how the digital trend has shifted. All the boring stuff is becoming very, very interesting. And I remember I used to do consumer tech and gadget reporting 6 years ago, and then I moved to artificial intelligence and all the other stuff and Web3, and now metaverse and also gaming virtual world. So yeah. Anyways, that's my story. But coming back to yours, so I really want to talk about the M Square product which you have, and how do you see the technology evolving around that?
M Squared is one of our largest ventures, and it's the entire idea behind M Squared is that it allows you to create self-sovereign metaverses that has characteristics that don't exist anywhere else. In particular, the idea of scale. So you can have tens of thousands of people all as unique avatars, with everyone being able to talk and having spatial voice in the same environment. And so that basically creates completely new metaversal applications that look a little bit more like what you expect in films, right? You see Ready Player One, you see these huge battles with thousands of people, all looking unique, all full fidelity physics. A lot of interesting things happen. Right now, that without M Squared, that physically is not possible. And so that's what M Squared is doing, is effectively building that technology, is built it, and then allowing companies to build out their own metaverses on top of that. But it's also not doing this completely in isolation. It's not like building one metaverse and then another metaverse and they never communicate. The idea is that they're all built on a common fabric, in effect, and a common network that allows the trade of goods between them. So, for example, in one metaverse, you could buy a hat, for example, for your avatar. You would then be able to take that to every other metaverse as well. So we're trying to not allow is these kind of walled gardens that certain platforms right now have on the internet, and actually allow that free trade of goods and services between the metaverse, and that really benefits everyone. That benefits both the consumers, because now those goods have more applications. It's like, hey, I can't just use this, and if I buy a Taylor Swift, T-shirt while watching the Taylor Swift concert, I can only use it in that environment. Now I can take that anywhere else. But also that also means that those items that the metaverse operators sell are also fundamentally more valuable because there's more utility to them. So it's a very beneficial symbiotic relationship.
Yes, and that brings me to the next question. That is, you're already competing with the tech giants with products like this and providing such technologies to the companies that are associated with you. And we could call you as a challenger to Apple and Meta as a duopoly. So, what unique strength and innovations allow you to compete with the big tech?
Yeah, so I think at a fundamentally, a lot of these businesses, Apple, Meta, Google, they have these huge revenue streams that already exist that they want to protect, right? And a lot of those revenue streams come by effectively owning the underlying network itself, right? In some ways, it's the opposite of what the internet was. When it was created, it was this, open network where anyone could help, well, be part of the kind of fundamental internet infrastructure as well to route traffic and then build applications on top. But then you see Apple and Google and Meta all starting to build their own walled gardens, right? App stores in particular, where just to play, do they gatekeep it? They have a tax on it, and so our approach is completely the opposite of that, right? Like we want to spur on the creation of an open network, just like the internet, where anyone can contribute to it, where anyone can participate, no one can gatekeep it, right? In the same way, access to internet is what I think is now defined as a human right, effectively, right? We see that the same thing for the metaverse, which potentially could be the next generation of the internet. And when the way we kind of act as a business is spur that on, but building businesses on top in the same way, like kind of like applications on top, and that's where we really get our revenue and kind of our business success. It also helps solve the chicken and egg problem where for a network to work, you have to have the initial set of customers and the initial set of users of that particular network, then supports the network and creates this symbiosis. So that's what we do. And the thing is that Apple or Google, look how much they're fighting now against various governments all over the world, in particular in the EU, that are trying to force them to open up their walled gardens. Whereas what we're going is our competitive advantage is that there is no walled garden in the first place. It's all open and accessible to everyone. So I think that's one side of it is that business model. The second part is I think metaverse is going to be for both humans and AI. That's just a reality. We're seeing these AI agents. You started the conversation with that, right? And they're going to be interacting with the metaverse as much as humans will. And so therefore, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built on top of that. If you want an AI, for example, to do transactions, they're not going to open a bank account with HSBC, right? As an AI, that's crazy, and that's where some of the Web3 components and the blockchain and the open accessibility will also allow AI agents to thrive in that particular network as well. So again, I don't think Apple or Google is really going to be as innovative and drive and allow for that because they have all this to protect.
Yes, that is a very important point. And at the same time, I also feel that there are competitors which Apple and Meta need, which should come from the UK ecosystem. Because if you hear about the world, if you compare the UK and US tech space, then there are lesser names over here, and most of the names actually migrate to the US at some point of time because they have more investment. So we need companies like Improbable to come up and yeah, support the businesses over here as well. So, Peter, what are your long term goals for Improbable as a venture builder? And how do you envision the company's role in the metaverse landscape 10 years from now?
So I think in 5 by 10 years from now, I think humanity itself will be spending a lot more time in metaversal like experiences. That's just the reality. Some of that will eat into existing time you maybe spend on your computer, like social networks or YouTube. Where I think you can build much better experiences and more engaging experiences if you've done the metaversal, but also potentially real world experiences as well. There's you're vying for that attention time versus going to the pub, for example, to meet your friends. Potentially there's metaversal experiences that are really great, and it might be more inclusive and wider because they're no longer be you're no longer limited by your geography. And so, what Improbable really wants to do in that time is that we've built out this infrastructure, we've incepted it, and this infrastructure has effectively taken a life on its own. It's been built upon, expanded. It's no longer controlled. We really do believe that it should be a permissionless, open network that anyone can contribute to in the same way, in the similar vein to the internet. And Improbable itself will have built multiple business on top of that. If it's 5, 10 years, maybe 30 to 50 businesses that are all part of this wider ecosystem that are contributing to it and that are building value out of it. And and at the heart, each business itself is trying to make itself successful rather than the ecosystem, but supporting the wider ecosystem itself. We're doing everything, doing applications in sports, in gaming, in social, and kind of in chat. There's even in kind of productivity software, there's a number of ventures that we're looking at there as well. And so that's what we're trying to build is this entire ecosystem of businesses. And when you look at success of Improbable, it's going to be much more defined not by kind of necessarily traditional profitability metrics. But more by kind of a portfolio look, where we look at the value of all our portfolio, cash, equity, potentially more exotic things like tokens, and that's what we're trying to grow. That then feed a venture building machine at the core to then be able to insert even more businesses over time.
Yes, that's a very interesting path that you are on, and this also brings me to my last question, and that is, what are some of the advices would you give to the aspiring entrepreneurs and investors who are looking to enter into AI and metaverse space?
Good question. I think one of the biggest advice I would say over the last year, I would say to, in particular to entrepreneurs, and I think investors, the good ones at least understand this, is that big ambitions and a measured, more sustainable go-to-market are not mutually exclusive. You often meet entrepreneurs that are they're kind of hesitant to talk about, say, for example, the big vision because they're worried that people will think that, oh, that means you're not going to build a more sustainable business and have milestones that make sense on the path to that. And compromise being kind of a more lean and efficient organization. You also meet entrepreneurs the opposite, where they're refusing to build initial product and MVP because it doesn't fulfill their big grand ambitions and vision, and so therefore they hold back by going to market to try and fulfill more of their ambitions. So I think I think an appreciation that both of those are not mutually exclusive, and that the right investors will also understand that, I think is is one of the things I really share to entrepreneurs. Secondly, I think this is true for both investors and entrepreneurs, is that a lot more can be done with a lot less nowadays. Right, the days of headcount size of an organization being a measure of success, like we used to have 7, 8 years ago, is well behind us. And I think we're not looking at much smaller companies that can take a decent product to market in in order of magnitude less size than the days old startups. Jeff Bezos used to talk about two pizza teams in Amazon. The idea was that no team should be bigger than what two pizzas can feed. I think we're starting to hit the age, in particular with AI, at the age of two pizza companies, where you can feed the entire company and you can have a valid product and great success with a small team like that. I think so. That's both for entrepreneurs and investors. And I think lastly, I would say more for entrepreneurs. If there's money on the table, take it. Sometimes they're very worried, like, oh, there's a little bit of extra dilution. I would say take it and don't spend it if you can. You're never going to miss that extra equity. And the world is so fast moving. The markets are so unpredictable in many ways. It basically means that if you have a bit more of a war chest, you are being more resilient to any kind of market turns. I've seen businesses that are genuinely very successful as a result of market just struggled to bring on investment, and as a result had to sometimes even collapse as a result. And that was just because of market conditions. And so having a war chest allows you to also pivot your product if necessary, get a little bit more time. And so that's kind of one of the advice. And in particular, if you're going after AI, where I would say there's obviously in an investment community right now a big bubble, right? Is if there's money on the table, I would take advantage of it, but just make sure you are much more disciplined in terms of how you spend it.
That is some great advice. I will also take one of those maybe in the future. And thank you so much, Peter, for joining us in the episode of Tech Talks with TFN. And you are the first one we are interviewing for the Tech Talks TFN for the year 2025, I guess. It's been inspiring to chat with you. And for everyone who found this discussion insightful, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned to our conversations at Tech Talks with TFN YouTube video channel, and with whom we talk with founders and innovators reshaping the tech landscape. Until next time, I'm Akansha Dimri, and take care and see you in the next episode.